There's a moment deep inside every person's story where the air thickens, and time seems to hold its breath. It happens quietly at first, a hesitation, a pause in the rhythm of life. Maybe it's when you sit at the edge of your bed, staring at the phone screen, fingers frozen above the call button to a job opportunity that could change everything. Or the countless times you tell yourself, tomorrow, I'll finally start, while the calendar pages slip away, unmarked and untouched. It's not the lack of dreams that ties you down, it's the invisible weight of that one decision you haven't made yet, the choice you postpone again and again, as if delaying gives you safety. Imagine Sarah, she's 32, working a job that pays the bills but steals her spirit. Every evening she returns to the small apartment she shares with doubt and exhaustion. She's lived through hopes that flickered and died, believing the spark was meant for someone else. But inside her chest, beneath the layers of overwhelmed thoughts, there's a quiet longing, a voice that whispers, what if? Yet, that whisper gets drowned out each time that phone remains silent, the email unsent, or the conversation avoided. What she can't quite say aloud is this: fear is hiding behind her hesitation, and it shadows not just one moment but her entire horizon. This is not just Sarah's story. It could be yours, or mine, or the story of anyone who stood at the crossroads with trembling hands. The crossroads where one path leads to a life unfolding, a deeper sense of purpose, abundance, and growth, and the other loops endlessly into safety, scarcity, and what-ifs. The difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck often comes down to one thing: a choice. That persistent, heart-pounding, soul-stretching act of saying yes to an uncertain future when every instinct screams no. But what makes this decision so hard to face? Why do we linger on the edges of change, watching ourselves slip into quiet desperation without taking that step? It's because the decision carries more than just consequences, it carries identity. To say yes means to risk the known discomfort and embrace unknown possibilities. It means surrendering the version of yourself who has found refuge in fear, even if that refuge is barely shelter at all. Making this choice cracks open the narrative you've told yourself for years, the story that keeps you small and safe. Think of Michael, a man whose hands still bear the scars of work he once loved but abandoned out of fear. He remembers the days when his heart raced with ambition, when the world seemed to whisper opportunities just beyond reach. Yet, time and trauma knitted a new story, a story of limitation and careful avoidance. When the chance to revive his dream reappeared, Michael hesitated. What if I fail again? He asked. What if this time, it's even harder? That question froze him. The decision became a mountain too steep to climb, and so he sat, watching years pass like leaves in a restless wind. Somewhere inside, he knew the dividing line was just one bold choice away, but making it felt like jumping into a void without a parachute. You might recognize pieces of yourself in Michael's silence or Sarah's longing. This isn't about failure or weakness. It's about the human heart's profound struggle with transformation. There's a sacred tension between the comfort of what's familiar, even if it's painful, and the terrifying openness of possibility. The truth is, almost everyone wrestles with this invisible boundary. But here's where it becomes deeply personal: the decision you fear is the very one that separates survival from thriving, scarcity from abundance. You've probably caught glimpses of people who seem to move forward effortlessly. Their lives shimmer with opportunity and success, and it stings to think it might be just because they chose differently, because they leaned into discomfort and made a choice when many of us stayed frozen. It's tempting to believe they have secret talents, luck, or privileges. But what they share most often is a willingness to meet fear head-on, to accept uncertainty as part of creation, to say yes even when the path is unclear. This moment, this space where your heart tightens and your breath quickens, is the gateway. It calls you to look inward and ask the question we often avoid: what decision am I postponing because I am afraid? Behind that question lies a power you may not have realized you carry, the power to choose freedom over fear, growth over comfort, abundance over scarcity. Nobody promises the road ahead will be smooth or simple. The choice to step forward will challenge your old ways of thinking, your habitual boundaries, and the stories you've told yourself for too long. But it's also the gateway to something deeper, richer, and more life-giving than you have yet dared to imagine. The decision you've held back isn't just a fork in your path, it is the very threshold of your transformation. It is where the hero inside you awakens. So as you listen now, lean into that uneasy silence beneath your thoughts. Feel the tug of that question stirring inside. Which decision am I avoiding? Which door have I left unopened because of fear? The journey ahead will ask you to confront those shadows, to meet your hesitations without judgment, and to discover the strength waiting quietly beneath. This is your moment, not to rush or push, but to become deeply aware. Because in this awareness lives the first pulse of change, and with it, the first breath of freedom. The hero you are destined to be does not live somewhere in the future, they are here right now, standing with you, waiting for that one decision. As the sun sank beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across a quiet street, Emma sat in her car with the engine off, heart pounding beneath her chest. For weeks, she'd wrestled with an opportunity that knocked at her door, one that promised to shake the very foundation of the life she'd carefully built. The familiar hum of the city faded into the background as a whirl of voices came alive inside her mind. What if you're not ready? What if it all crumbles? What if people see you fail? Each question was a stone pressing heavier in her chest. But this moment was different, it carried a weight she'd never acknowledged before. This wasn't just a decision about a new job or a new town. It was a reckoning with what she believed about herself. The choice wasn't external, it was into what kind of person she was willing to transform. Emma recalled a conversation with her grandfather years ago, when she was just a girl struggling to ride her bike without training wheels. Breathless and teary after yet another fall, she shouted in frustration, "I can't do this." He looked gently into her eyes, worn hand steady on her shoulders, and said, "Sweetheart, falling is never the choice. But rising again, that's the decision that changes everything." His words echoed now, framing the dividers between fear and courage in stark relief. Decisions aren't just about moving forward, sometimes, they're about standing up to who you've been told you are and daring to become who you were always meant to be. What becomes clear when dwelling on that kind of decision is how deeply entwined it is with identity. In Emma's case, stepping into this unknown role meant dismantling old narratives of "I'm a safe choice, not a risk." It signified surrendering the mask of predictability, the comfortable script that assured no surprises. That delicate moment wasn't a simple yes or no, it was a profound rewrite of self. To embrace this choice was to claim a new story, about resilience, evolution, and refusal to settle. And that's where the true power of such a decision exists, not in the external success it might lead to, but in the quiet, transformative act of remaking identity from within. Yet, many find this internal recalibration more daunting than any external hurdle. Tim, a former teacher turned entrepreneur, confided in me once about his own crossroads. "It wasn't the market risks or the scary lack of stability that held me back," he reflected. "It was the voice inside telling me I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong in the world I was aiming for." I realized when I finally embraced the decision to shift careers, I was stepping into unknown territory emotionally more than financially. This illustrates a hidden facet of the decision's gravity. It uproots not just your actions but your internal ecosystem, challenging long-standing beliefs about worth, capability, and belonging. This transformation doesn't happen in isolation. Consider the ripples that emanate when someone steps beyond the threshold. Family dynamics, friendships, even self-imposed limitations all respond in kind. Emma's partner found himself unsettled by her newfound ambition, worried the familiar balance would shift. This tension underscored how decisions become entangled with others' projections and fears, forcing you to navigate not only your own inner terrain but also the landscapes of shared relationships. Learning to stand firm in your choice often requires creating boundaries grounded in your truth, a task as delicate as it is necessary. Another dimension unfolds when you realize the decision you're avoiding has a kind of gravity that bends time. It's as if life pauses on that choice, suspending progress until you're willing to face it. A friend of mine, Carla, described this as living inside a limbo loop, moments, months, even years flowing by without momentum, anchored by the unspoken yes or no trapped somewhere deep. The irony is painful, waiting feels like safety when, in truth, it's stagnation. Understanding this gave Carla the impetus to break the cycle, to stop mistaking delay for protection and start recognizing decisiveness as liberation. Moreover, this decision is not always a leap into the unknown, sometimes it's a reclaiming of something long forgotten. That's where it becomes deeply soulful. For Vikram, a man who spent decades suppressing his creativity for stability's sake, saying yes to art was a resurrection. He hadn't really thought he'd ever be an artist. Yet, in that decision, he found the wellspring of joy, healing, and vitality he'd been thirsting for but didn't realize was missing. Thus, the act of deciding can be less about forging a new path and more about returning home, to your core essence, dreams, and untapped potential. Now, consider how this applies when you face your own crossroads. That decision you postponed or half-measured might feel like a cornered animal inside your mind, snarling with doubts, inertia, and the clamor of what if. But beneath those noisy alarms lies a quieter truth. The decision is inviting you not into perfect certainty, but into your own unfolding, messy, beautiful life. Deciding is less about guaranteeing success and more about embracing the struggle as part of growth. It's less about the destination and more about starting the conversation with your own bravery. The moments leading up to a decision often feel like standing in a storm, the howling winds threatening to sweep you away. But as Emma learned sitting in her car that evening, sometimes it takes sinking into that storm to realize it's the very weather awakening the hero inside. The choice she faced was not merely a change in circumstances, it was a portal to her becoming, untethered, unafraid, and undeniably alive. And though the road ahead might twist and unpredictably unfold, she recognized that no fear, no hesitation, could diminish the power contained in this act of inner allegiance. When next you feel that familiar tightness of dread and indecision, listen carefully, not to the louder voices of doubt, but to the subtler pulse within that beckons toward possibility. This decision you fear is no ordinary fork in the road. It is your invitation to step into the story only you can write, the life only you can claim, and the hero waiting patiently with open arms. The night was thick with stillness when Daniel finally found himself standing before the door he'd avoided for years, the door leading to the conversation that could redefine everything. His palms were slick with sweat, his breath shallow as the weight of hesitation nearly crushed him. He heard himself mutter, "What if they reject me? What if it's too late?" Yet, stepping back no longer felt like an option, it was as if the air itself had shifted, urging him forward. This moment was not simply about speech, it was a profound act of vulnerability, a declaration of his readiness to claim space that fear had long denied him. Daniel's story unfolded over decades shadowed by silence. Growing up, he had mastered the art of invisibility, slipping beneath the radar to avoid conflict, disappointment, and the burning sting of unmet expectations. He had learned early that risking his voice meant risking love, security, even belonging. But now, standing before the door, he recognized that the very walls he'd built for protection were also cages. To make this decision was to set the first brick of a new foundation, one carved from honesty and courage rather than avoidance. Unlike a sudden leap, Daniel's path was marked by subtle shifts, moments where the worn patterns of silence began to crack. He recalled an afternoon years ago when a colleague asked directly about his dreams and he stumbled, unable to answer without shame. It was a small fissure, but one that leaked the truth. Long-suppressed desires pulsed beneath the surface, aching to breathe. Recognizing this fracture was the initial step toward dismantling the armor he'd worn so faithfully. Sometimes, the journey to the decision we fear is less a thunderclap and more the slow erosion of boundaries, revealing the raw terrain underneath. Another dimension of Daniel's struggle lay in the unexpected contradictions within himself. He observed how part of him longed for recognition and change, while another part clung desperately to the familiar identity shaped by years of constraint. This tug-of-war created an invisible battlefield where he negotiated loyalty to past wounds with the urgent call of growth. He found that honoring both voices, the fearful and the hopeful, was crucial. Instead of silencing doubt with force, he learned to invite it into the room, listen to its stories, and gently remind it that the future could hold safety and strength in ways it hadn't yet conceived. People like Daniel often face a unique kind of solitude, distinct from loneliness. It is the solitude born from standing at the intersection where old roles no longer fit, and new ones have not yet formed. For him, making the feared decision meant piercing through this gray zone, embracing ambiguity with patience and tenderness, rather than desperation. It became clear that such a choice is less about certainty and more about trust, in oneself, in timing, and in the unfolding nature of life. This trust acts as an anchor during the storm, a quiet force steadying each step despite the unknown. Interestingly, the decision Daniel confronted did not emerge in isolation but was woven within a tapestry of relationships that both complicated and enriched his process. When he confided in his closest friend, Marissa, her response surprised him. Instead of offering quick fixes or encouragement, she simply held space for his vulnerability. "You don't have to have it all figured out," she said softly. "This is about becoming, not arriving." That moment shifted Daniel's perspective, underscoring how community, when rooted in genuine presence rather than pressure, can become a sanctuary for decisions that feel perilous. Meanwhile, Daniel's mind discovered an unexpected source of clarity during long walks beneath a sprawling canopy of oaks. The way leaves turned and fell, revealing branches stripped bare only to bloom again with fresh life, mirrored his internal cycles of release and renewal. Nature's cyclical wisdom whispered that decline precedes growth, endings make way for beginnings. Such reflections became a form of meditation, a ritual anchoring him to the truth that stepping into new identity requires a letting go no less than a claiming. What added complexity to Daniel's journey was the realization that this decision couldn't be broken down into neat options. It wasn't a simple binary of go or stay, but a mosaic of smaller choices woven together, each carrying its own blend of risk and promise. Choosing to speak was linked to choosing vulnerability. Choosing vulnerability was linked to embracing uncertainty. Embracing uncertainty demanded patience with discomfort. This intricate dance discouraged impulsiveness and invited deliberate presence. The true courage, Daniel found, was in staying present with the discomfort rather than fleeing from it. When at last Daniel pushed the door open, his heart thudded, a blend of dread and exhilaration swirling in his chest. Words spilled forth, imperfect and trembling, but authentic, the gift he owed himself and those who cared for him. The conversation shifted old dynamics and seeded new possibilities, not because of flawless execution, but because of the earnestness rooted in that foundational choice. In that raw moment, Daniel glimpsed how the feared decision was not a one-time event but a gateway to continual transformation, a lifelong commitment to showing up as his truest self. For you, the one reading this, the weight of your own unopened door may press just as heavily. Know this, the decision you hesitate to make often demands a reconciliation of your inner contradictions, a patient navigation through evolving identity, and a sacred trust in the unknown. It is less a dramatic epiphany and more the steady labor of becoming, a profound progression rather than an instant leap. If you approach it with openness instead of resistance, you may find that what once felt like a paralyzing barrier becomes a threshold rich with possibility and heart. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds in Mara's small apartment, casting thin stripes of light across the cluttered kitchen table. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat forgotten beside a pile of notebooks, brimming with ideas, unfinished sketches, and dreams she once believed were unreachable. Today was the day her phone buzzed with the reminder she had set weeks ago, an invitation to submit a proposal for an art residency abroad. Mara's fingers hovered trembling over the screen, caught between yearning and hesitation, between the comfort of routine and the unknown waiting on the other side. Mara had spent years nurturing a quiet passion for her art, but this decision, the decision to commit to putting herself forward, to stand vulnerable before a wider world, felt less like an opportunity and more like stepping through a mirror into a different life. Compounding her anxiety was the realization that the risk extended far beyond professional uncertainty. It tangled with the very idea of her place in the world. Submitting that proposal wasn't just entering a contest, it was an uncompromising declaration that she deserved to be seen and to belong where few from her background dared to dream. Her internal struggle wasn't the simple tug of comfort against change. Rather, it was a profound dialectic between the tension of self-worth and the innate human craving for connection. The decision she faced here was wrapped within layers of legacy, the voices of her family's doubts, the patterns etched by socioeconomic barriers, and the invisible scripts of invisibility many carry without knowing. The question was no longer, "Can I do this?" but rather, "Do I have the right to occupy space that feels foreign, even forbidden?" Such struggles often remain unspoken yet wield disproportionate power in shaping who dares cross into flourishing beyond survival. Elsewhere, Carlos wrestled with the echoes of a different but equally complex decision. After decades anchoring his identity to the role of devoted provider and tireless caretaker in his community, he began to feel a restless itch beneath the armor. A chance to return to school for a degree in environmental science came calling, a leap into new waters that had been whispered about in his mind for years. Yet, his hesitancy was not solely about academic demands or financial strain. The real battle was with the invisibility cloaked inside him, the belief that he must choose either self-sacrifice or self-expression but never both. One evening, beneath dim streetlights buzzing overhead, Carlos confided in his neighbor, Elena. "It's like I'm trapped between two selves," he said, voice low but resolute. "One that's known and needed, and one that's whispering for freedom but feels like I'd be betraying who I've been." Elena listened, then smiled with gentle certainty. "Maybe the choice isn't about choosing one or the other. Maybe it's about allowing yourself to be whole, even if that means living with discomfort a while." Her words planted a seed of reconciliation rather than division, an invitation to dissolve false dichotomies that shadowed Carlos's decision. This intersection, the messiness of identity expanded rather than fragmented, is where many falter and where many are reborn. The decision long postponed is rarely about a single moment or action. Instead, it is a threshold that calls for embracing paradox and uncertainty, often demanding a reckoning with the fragmented parts of ourselves that have been seated in conflict. Far from neat binaries, decisions that shape our trajectory often require simultaneously honoring our past selves and daring to ignite future versions, capable of holding contradiction and transformation alike. Vividly, consider Lila's journey. After years in a corporate law job that had drained her soul, she was offered an internship with a nonprofit fighting human trafficking. The chance was a beacon, but she felt swallowed in doubt. Leaving behind stability, prestige, and people's expectations was a seismic shift. On a cold spring afternoon, during a rare break by a city fountain, she confided to a colleague, "I'm terrified of disappointing everyone, including myself." The colleague's answer was simple but profound: holding on to what's safe can sometimes feel like loving yourself less. It's not about abandoning people, but about choosing authenticity as a form of self-love. In this light, decisions often embody an act of reparenting, the tender but courageous task of reclaiming your right to honor your inner truth, despite outer pressures. This reparenting dismantles the limiting scripts we've inherited and builds new neural pathways of self-compassion and agency. It transforms fear from a chain into a compass, guiding toward deeper alignment rather than paralyzing avoidance. Now, consider how this applies when you face your own stirring hesitation. What layers beneath your indecision remain unexamined? Are there voices from your past or unspoken narratives that shape your not yet? Too often, the decision we place on hold is tangled with identity fragments clamoring for integration, with fears about what others will say, or illusions that the right time will someday magically appear. Yet life's rhythms rarely pause for comfort. The call is less about eliminating fear and more about moving with it, learning to speak gently to the parts of yourself recoiling, while simultaneously stepping forward. Next time your thoughts circle endlessly around the right choice, try envisioning the process more like threading a revered path than climbing a sheer cliff. Each step may feel tentative, but the current beneath is alive, flowing toward deepening your own evolution. Ask yourself, what nuance, what paradox, what part of me do I need to embrace to unlock this decision? How can I hold kindness for my hesitations as fiercely as I hold the vision for my becoming? It is in this embrace of complexity that real growth pulses. When Mara finally hit send on her proposal, long after her hands stopped trembling, it was not just a submission, it was a reclamation. A declaration that the mosaic of her history, her dreams, her fears, and her fierce desire belonged unapologetically together. Whatever the outcome, she stepped into the dance of transformation, knowing that the worth she sought was not in the approval waiting elsewhere, but in the courage woven deep within that one irrevocable act. Reflecting on this journey so far, imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon as dawn breaks. The walls on either side bear the marks of countless years, a testament to struggles weathered, choices made, and paths hesitated upon. Below, a river winds relentlessly forward, carving new shapes into the landscape with patient persistence. You sense that crossing to the other side is possible, yet the bridge is not yet fully constructed, its planks woven from threads of courage, insight, and quiet reckoning. The air is thick with possibility, humming softly with the tension of transformation just waiting to be claimed. Within you, a convergence unfolds, as if disparate rivers of thought and feeling have been hastening toward an unseen delta. The currents of fear and hope swirl together, indistinguishable in the turbulence. The shape of what lies ahead does not appear in sharp relief, instead, it slowly takes form in the shifting light of your attention. This is not a place for certainty or quick escape, but for an embrace of complexity, a dance between holding and letting go, between retreat and advance. You may find your breath catching, the familiar tremor of hesitation stirring alongside a nascent heartbeat calling you forward. In this delicate balance, you hear the echoes of silent dialogues, a conversation between the self that has sought shelter in hesitation and the self daring enough to reach for something beyond. It is not a battle as much as a negotiation, a conversation held in whispered breaths and lingering glances inward. The voices of doubt, vulnerability, and longing intermingle like notes in a symphony that has been quietly composing beneath your surface. No single melody dominates. Instead, their interplay crafts a resonant base upon which the music of change begins to build. Outside, the world mirrors this tension and potential. The shifting shadows of trees bending toward the sun, the gentle rustling of leaves heralding the turning of seasons, all witness the quiet magic that happens when timelines bend beneath the weight of choice. There is an unspoken understanding in the air, one that whispers across the landscape to those willing to listen. Transformation does not unravel through grand leaps alone, but through the weaving of small threads of intention, bravery, and self-recognition into a fabric strong enough to carry new life. Imagine a traveler suspended between two lands, the familiar, worn footsteps behind them, the open unknown inviting from just beyond their view. Each heartbeat contains the gravity of what must be surrendered and the exhilaration of what might bloom. This traveler is both you and a mirror reflecting the possibility that has always dwelled within your own depths, waiting not for permission or perfect clarity, but for the quiet resolve to step toward what calls most deeply. As you lean into this moment, the landscape of your inner world begins to shift in subtle yet profound ways. Edges soften where they once seemed jagged, shadows retreat from places they had long claimed. You may feel the stirrings of a new rhythm, neither hurried nor stagnant, but calibrated to the pace of genuine growth. This rhythm invites an openness not only to what you can control, but also to the mysteries that pulse beyond the grasp of comprehension. It is here, in the fertile tension of trust and uncertainty, that the courage to proceed takes root. In the folds of this unfolding, there is an invitation to hold your vulnerability as a sacred compass rather than a stumbling block, to recognize that the decision lingering in your heart is more than choice, it is a portal into becoming. The path may not reveal itself in immediate clarity, nor does it demand perfection. Instead, it requires a willingness to traverse the unknown with presence, grace, and fierce gentleness, qualities often overshadowed by the clamor of self-doubt. As twilight deepens and the stars begin to claim the sky, consider the quiet miracles happening beneath the surface of your mind and spirit. The threads of all that you have wrestled with, fear, hope, identity, and unspoken longing, are weaving together into a tapestry poised for a new chapter. The journey thus far has prepared you for an awakening not of sudden illumination, but of steady unfolding, not of distant shores alone, but of deepened roots within. You stand at the cusp, where the known dissolves and the possible beckons. The decision that once loomed like an overwhelming tempest now hums as a call to align with the truest voice within. And though the path ahead may remain shrouded in mist, the essence of your hero's journey has already begun, a steady pulse echoing beneath the surface, guiding you toward the place where transformation awaits. The sun slid low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose as Lila lingered on the bench by the riverbank, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the worn wood. Just days before, she had stood at the precipice of a choice that stretched wide before her, one cloaked in uncertainty, shadowed by the weight of doubt and the ghosts of what might be lost. The decision wasn't just about changing a job or moving cities, it was a quiet revolution within, a deep, aching yearning to step into a version of herself she had long silenced. Now, as the cool breeze tangled in her hair, she felt the invisible threads of that moment weaving through her, stitching together courage and fear, hesitation and hope. In the murmuring currents of the river and the soft rustle of leaves, Lila heard the echo of every soul who had ever teetered on the edge of transformation. The challenge they faced was not merely external, it was an intimate battle with vulnerability, identity, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are permitted to become. Every hesitation, every not yet whispered by our fears, is a testament to the invisible chasm between survival and thriving, between retreating to safety and boldly embracing the unknown. Yet, nestled within that chasm lies an invitation, an unspoken vow that the very act of choosing, even trembling toward uncertainty, is where the richest transformation begins. She remembered the words her mentor once shared on a similarly somber evening: the hero's journey isn't a grand, sweeping gesture. It's the quiet decision to turn your face toward discomfort, to walk steadily into the shadows where your truest self waits. That truth settled like a balm over her restless thoughts. Lila understood now that the bridge spanning from scarcity to abundance, from confinement to flourishing, doesn't materialize overnight. It's forged in the small, relentless acts of inner reckoning, the moments when we, despite trembling knees and faltering breath, say yes to becoming. A few yards away, a couple's laughter broke through the evening hush, innocent and full of promise. Watching them, Lila felt a surge of recognition. The courage to decide is often interwoven with connection, with the collective pulse of humanity mapping its own odysseys through fear and renewal. No hero walks alone, the acts of bravery we make resonate beyond ourselves, stirring a current that travels and transforms in unseen ways. Her decision, once sensed as solitary and fraught, now shimmered with a new light, a ripple in the vastness inviting others to meet their own crossroads with unabashed honesty. The sky deepened into a dusky indigo, stars emerging like scattered candles, each a silent witness to innumerable choices made in the quiet spaces between doubt and faith. Lila closed her eyes, inhaling the cool night air, sensing that the decision was perhaps less a single moment and more the entirety of an ongoing awakening, a calling to live with fierce authenticity amid life's inherent uncertainties. To choose differently is to embrace paradox, to find freedom not by fleeing fear but by befriending it, allowing it to coexist with hope, resilience, and relentless self-love. As the river carried the light away, she imagined her future unfolding, not as an exact mapped journey, but as a tapestry woven with threads of perseverance, bravery, and grace. The hero she sought was never somewhere distant or idealized. She saw now that this figure lived quietly within her, in the steady pulse beneath her doubts, in the awakening embers of resolve, in the tender vulnerability that makes magic possible. Each step forward from here was, in itself, a triumph, a deliberate echo of the profound truth that flourishing begins the moment we claim our power to choose, imperfect and brave. And so, as night cradled the city, Lila rose, the river's song ringing in her ears like a promise. In the spaces where fear once ruled, a new voice whispered clearly, "Here is where you begin anew. Here is where your life expands beyond scarcity, into the boundless realm waiting patiently within." With a heart both fragile and fierce, she stepped forward, not into assured victory, but into the sacred dance of becoming, where the greatest heroism is found in the simple, steadfast act of deciding to live fully alive.